Police searching for a mother and her 2 young children find 3 bodies. Former EastEnders actress Sian Blake and her sons Zachary and Amon haven't been seen for more than 3 weeks. Detectives have started a murder inquiry. They want to speak to the children's father, who's now missing.
Also tonight, Cameron gives his ministers a free vote in the referendum on Europe.
Tears of a president. Obama weeps for the child victims of America's guns.
And from the local pool to the big pond, the British man planning to swim the Atlantic.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin.
Good evening. Murder detectives looking for a woman missing with her 2 young children today discovered 3 bodies at the family home. The former EastEnders actress Sian Blake, who played Frankie Pierre in the soap, was last seen almost a month ago with her 2 sons, Zachary and Amon.
The bodies were found in the garden of their home in Kent. Miss Blake's partner, the father of the children, has now disappeared and is being hunted by police. From the scene, Richard Pallow reports.
At shortly after noon today, in this quiet Kent town, a grim discovery. 3 bodies found in the back garden of a house whose 3 occupants have been missing for nearly a month. Formal identification has not taken place, but they are believed to be Sian Blake and her 2 sons, Zachary, aged 8, and Amon, aged just 4.
Obviously, we will look to formally identify those bodies. The family have been told. It's too early to speculate on those, but of course it's tragic. It's sad news for the family.
This is now a triple murder investigation. Forensic officers have been searching the home all afternoon. Sian Blake and her 2 children were last seen on December the 13th when they visited family in the Waltham Forest area. Police spoke to Sian's boyfriend, Arthur Simpson Kent, 3 days later at their home after she was reported missing by family members. He then disappeared. Nearly 3 weeks later, a car belonging to the mother of 2 was found in Bethnal Green. And today, officers searching for the missing family discovered the 3 bodies in the garden of their Erith home.
Right, I'll get down the bank, get the cash, and you can let me have the keys.
Sian Blake was an actress in the soap EastEnders in the mid-90s. Neighbours describe her recently, though, as looking frail due to motor neurone disease, and of her sons being full of life.
Really devastating to hear. Just think about if it is, you know, the 2 little boys, like what a life they had in front of them, and yeah, just devastating really.
The police are now urgently trying to locate their father, Mr. Simpson Kent, but admit they have no idea where he is. That is one question they can't yet answer. The other, just how did 3 bodies lie undiscovered here for quite so long? And one neighbour also told me that the police have been here every single day for about 3 weeks, and on December the 18th they actually forced their way into the property. So they obviously had their suspicions, but yeah, they didn't find what they found until this lunchtime. And of course, Mr. Simpson Kent at the time was very much stressed that he was not a suspect, but tonight he's very much the man that they wish to speak to. Now, late this afternoon, 3 bodies were brought out of here on 2 stretchers, an indication, if you want, of the age of 2 of those. The post-mortem will take place tomorrow morning.
Richard Pallow in Erith, thank you.
David Cameron has said he will allow his ministers to vote against the government in a referendum on Britain staying in Europe. The Prime Minister said members of the Cabinet could take a different personal view to the official government line.
But he said he will only let that happen after renegotiations have been completed. From Westminster, here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp.
In the end, most of his cabinet would have accepted nothing less. Split as they are over the EU, today the Eurosceptic ones got the news they'd been hoping for. They will be able to campaign to leave, even if David Cameron is campaigning to stay in. The Prime Minister announced it to welcome cheers from his party this afternoon.
There will be a clear government position, but it will be open to individual ministers to take a different personal position while remaining part of the government. Ultimately, it will be for the British people to decide this country's future.
But the Labour leader accused Mr Cameron of once again putting his party's future before the country's.
Does he not see that by isolating Britain from Europe, he's making it more difficult for us to work with partners on all these issues? And that once again, he's really putting the politics of his own party above those of the national interest.
Sat next to Jeremy Corbyn as Shadow Foreign Secretary was Hilary Benn, still in his job, as Mr Corbyn had to break off from his two-day reshuffle to come to the chamber.
Can I apologise for interrupting what's clearly the longest reshuffle in history?
So who in David Cameron's own cabinet is this deal for? Ian Duncan-Smith is likely to take up the offer of campaigning for Britain to leave the EU. Also Michael Gove, Chris Grayling and Sajid Javid. Lord Lamont, who lived through the Tory splits on Europe in the 1990s, thinks Mr Cameron had little choice.
I think it was, in a sense, an inevitable decision, but I think people
because he had no choice. The party simply wouldn't allow him.
I think people would have been unhappy had the decision not gone this way. But I think possibly some people would have resigned.
Britain shall remain a member of the European community.
The Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson did the same in 1975. Then it was his party which was split over what was then the European Community, and he allowed ministers to back both the yes and no campaigns in that referendum. 40 years later, Mr Cameron is doing the same.
I think he's sensibly taken the course that I think will make it easiest for him to hold the Conservative Party together once the referendum is over.
But holding this party together on this issue will not be an easy task. There was an inevitability about today's decision, even though Mr Cameron has said before that ministers would be bound by the rules on cabinet responsibility. But now it's clear that those rules will end the moment the new deal with Europe is done. That just leaves the question of when it will be. Well, the Prime Minister said in here today he wants the referendum not less than 3 months after he's signed that new deal. So if it happens as planned at next month's European summit, it means we could have a referendum as early as June.
All right, Chris, thank you very much.
And that shadow cabinet reshuffle that David Cameron was joking about in the Commons does not appear to have finished yet. There's been just one confirmed departure so far. Our political correspondent Libby Wiener is in Westminster right now. Libby, what's taking so long?
Well, I think the simple answer to that is Jeremy Corbyn. As a backbencher for more than 30 years, he didn't have to make many big decisions, but now he's trying to stamp his authority on the parliamentary party and appearing to fail to do so. That is effectively what reshuffles are meant to be about. This has taken 29 hours so far. Now, there was speculation that the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Hilary Benn, was going to be sacked. That doesn't seem to be happening. He's staying. There's speculation too that Maria Eagle, the Shadow Defence Secretary, would go. She does seem to be in the firing line, but it doesn't appear that Jeremy Corbyn can find anyone to replace her at the moment. The one casualty we do know about is the former Shadow Culture Secretary, Michael Dugar. He said that he didn't believe that Jeremy Corbyn was leading the party in the right way, and he's paid the price. He said he didn't regret what he said for a single second.
The real casualty today isn't myself, but it's been the new politics, because I think people have looked at not just this last couple of days, but in the last few weeks about how people have been treated. And I think they said this is not new politics, this looks like the old politics. And I thought that's a real shame and a real squandered opportunity.
I think if Jeremy Corbyn thought that he could silence his critics by sacking them, Michael Dugar has just proved him wrong.
Libby Wiener at Westminster, thank you.
Well, Labour says the Home Secretary has serious questions to answer over how a terror suspect fled Britain to join so-called Islamic State. Siddhartha Dar travelled to Syria in 2014 whilst on bail. He's also been linked to a new IS propaganda video. Our security editor, Rohit Kashru, joins me now. Rohit, awkward for the government, this. What did Theresa May have to say about it?
Well, this case is several months old, but questions re-emerged over the weekend with the release of this new IS propaganda video. It features a masked man who appears to have a British accent. Siddhartha Dar from London is one of several British jihadists who it's suspected might be behind the mask. There has been an initial assessment that has been completed. The Home Secretary confirmed that today, but she was asked to answer questions about how he was able to get to Syria in the first place, because he was on bail at the time. He'd been arrested on suspicion of encouraging acts of terrorism. He didn't surrender his passport, and somehow he was allowed to abscond.
I would like to echo the Prime Minister's words that this is a barbaric and appalling video. Daesh seek to intimidate and spread hateful propaganda, but in doing so they only expose their own depravity and the emptiness of their proposition.
And after the completion of that initial assessment, the investigation goes on to try and work out who that person is behind the mask. We've spoken to friends and family of Siddhartha Dar. They're divided about whether this is him. But we spoke tonight to a facial recognition expert who said that he was fairly certain that this, in fact, wasn't him. He said that it's also possible that the voice on the film doesn't belong to the man that we see in that video.
All right, Rohit, thank you very much indeed.
Still to come here on the ITV Evening News.
We do not have to accept this carnage as the price of freedom.
The President's passionate pledge on gun control.
And more than 20 children are rescued from a school bus trapped in the floodwaters. Those stories and more right after the break. Welcome back. President Obama openly wept today as he talked about the child victims of mass shootings in America. The president wiped away tears as he announced new measures to tighten the country's gun controls. Flanked by the relatives of people killed in gun crimes, he said he'll use executive powers to force through moves to restrict sales. The father of one victim told ITV News the measures are long overdue. From Washington, Emma Murphy reports.
Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day.
A president with tears streaming down his face after a presidency punctuated by the mass shootings, which have become such a part of American life.
All of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up to the gun lobby's lies.
Surrounded by those who've survived and some of the families of those who did not, the 44th President of the United States defied Congress to amend America's gun laws. Now, everyone buying a gun will be subject to a background check and all sellers licensed.
Hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost brothers and sisters or buried their own children. So the gun lobby may be holding Congress hostage right now, but they cannot hold America hostage. We do not have to accept this carnage as the price of freedom.
Andrew Parker knows what it is to live with such loss. His daughter Alison, a reporter, and her friend and cameraman were shot dead live on air by a colleague who filmed the attack. Mr. Parker welcomes the greater control and increased investment in mental health support.
This is something that's, I think, long overdue, and unfortunately, if Congress won't do anything, he's going to do it, and I applaud him.
Any guns on you today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
In America, guns are a familiar part of life. Weapons like this available for sale at shows with only a cursory check, and sometimes no check at all. With the right to carry arms enshrined in the Constitution, talk of a change creates outrage in America's conservative heartland, with the president accused of dishonouring the essence of the country.
Well, I think it's what the country's based on. You know? It's part of our rights to have, and we want to be able to protect ourselves and so on. Should be able to do that.
I think the president's a good man. I think his policies are misguided and possibly illegal.
Despite the tears and anger, the president's announcement is only a small tweak to a flawed system, but it is his attempt to address the greatest frustration of his administration.
And the great irony of all this is that the president's nickname is the gun seller in chief, because whenever he speaks about gun control, sales go up. In fact, in the 7 years of his presidency, production has doubled. Of course, because this is an executive order, it will come into force immediately. But if there is a Republican president next year, it can be rescinded.
All right, Emma, thank you very much indeed.
Well, back here, and it'll come as a little surprise, but the Met Office said today that December was the UK's wettest and warmest on record. Many parts of Britain are still suffering the effects.
Yes, in York today, school children had to be rescued from a submerged bus, and many home and business owners have concerns about improvements to flood defences and whether they'll be able to get insurance. Our consumer editor, Chris Choi, reports.
Today, almost 30 children had to be rescued from this school bus when it hit floods near York. The latest sign that for thousands, the problems, like the waters, have not gone away. In this city, what made up people's homes and livelihoods is now discarded in skips, and official promises of a scheme to make insurance affordable, even in flood areas, means nothing to residents like this who simply couldn't afford a policy.
We've lost everything that meant everything to us. It might not seem like a lot to the normal passerby who's just seeing a pile of rubbish outside. It'd be rubbish to them. To me, it's everything.
When York's flood barrier failed on Boxing Day, these were the scenes. A torrent of promises came from national politicians, but on the ground, it's others who are helping.
You got toiletries, tinned food what will last you a while. Cleaning products and things like that. We'll actually give them out to everyone what need it.
Today, it was local volunteers who were on the ground.
Oh, we had a beautiful salon, engineered wood floor, beautiful colours.
Devastated businesses like this hair salon say government hasn't done enough to tackle rocketing insurance premiums in flood areas.
Gutted, truly gutted. I mean, we work very, very hard at what we do here, and to see it taken away, it was extremely upset. I'm getting upset by it now. I told myself that I wouldn't cry anymore.
And many here deeply suspect reassurances that sufficient will be spent on flood defences in future.
I don't quite think it's the right thing to cut budgets and wait for something, a catastrophe or disaster to happen and then say, oops, we made a mistake.
While they're throwing out the debris, here they fear soon politicians will be ditching their interest in the complex issues of future flood prevention. Well, soon after this floodwater arrived, there was a downpour of political interest. That continued tonight in the House of Commons as the Environment Secretary Liz Truss updated MPs on the flooding situation. She says 16,000 homes across England were flooded, but 20,000 were protected. She sees that not just as a defence of people's homes, but also of government policy itself.
Chris, thanks very much.
And a quick update on that story we brought you yesterday about the historic castle on the brink of collapsing into the River Dee. Now, thankfully, Aberdeenshire Castle in Aberdeenshire is still intact, and work started today on trying to shore it up. Tons of gravel are now being put into the river to try to divert the flow of the water.
And the dramatic moment, tons of ice fell onto people waiting on a pavement in Turkey, has been captured on CCTV. The slab of snow and ice slid from the roof of a mosque, burying some passers-by and sending others diving for safety.
And the astronaut Tim Peake is to carry out the first ever spacewalk by a British citizen. He's due to step outside the International Space Station in 10 days' time.
Back on Earth, there was not one but two very special pieces of cricket history made today. In England's second test in Cape Town, Temba Bavuma became the first black player to score a Test 100 for South Africa. A great moment for him, South African cricket and his country. And if you think he did well, what about this? In a school match in Bombay, 15-year-old Pranav Dhanawada became the first cricketer to hit more than 1,000 runs in one innings, 1,009 to be precise, which I'm guessing will probably not be beaten in a hurry.
And finally tonight, tour Britain hoping to make a bit of history himself. Former policeman Ben Hooper is aiming to swim 2,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean, braving giant waves and sharks.
He'll set off from Africa in the next few weeks, and if everything goes to plan, he'll reach land in Brazil 4 months later. Rupert Evelyn spoke to Ben as he makes his final preparations at his local swimming pool.
Hungry sharks, huge waves, searing heat. None of them can be found at Cheltenham Leisure Centre. When you're preparing to swim the Atlantic, this is as good a place as any to put in the miles.
the purpose of being here is that it acts as a gym. So I'm doing cardiovascular, I'm doing sprint work, and the temperatures are very similar to what I'll be starting in at around that 27, 28 degree mark. Air temperature's obviously quite humid too.
Of course, there's been practice in more appropriate climes than Gloucestershire. Florida's sunshine, open water and support team alongside, all part of the preparation to achieve a world first. Ben will start from Dakar in Senegal on a 2,000-mile journey to Natal in Brazil. He will be in the water for up to 12 hours a day. But when he needs to sleep or rest, he'll climb on board a support boat. Some people might say you don't look like an Olympic swimmer or an athlete even.
No, and they're perfectly right to say that. I've watched my body transform itself, and I've gone ripped, I've gone wide, I've come in, and as the volume's built, and if you look at other marathon swimmers, you usually find the majority are quite slim, or they carry, like I am at the moment, extra fat. And the reason I'm piling on the calories is because I'm going to need 10 to 12,000 calories per day to get across the Atlantic.
Today he keeps company with swimmers doing it for fitness and fun. The ocean has different threats, and to swim it in full is an epic challenge that, if successful, could be completed by summertime. Rupert Evelyn, ITV News, Cheltenham.
Tempted?
No. Wish him luck, though.
Absolutely. That's all from us for now. Tom Bradley will be here with the news at 10.
But from everyone here, have a very good evening.
Bye-bye.